It is a mentality that shuns excuses and focuses on what's at stake. A mindset that resolves within itself that you must totally empty yourself to experience victory. A memory that remembers that who and what you are playing for is bigger than you.
Are you dating? Are your relationships building towards marriage? Are you struggling in the whole courting and dating process? How do you know if the one that you're dating is, quote, the one, end quote? Do you have someone to talk to about these important matters? Maybe you are confused in the whole process and things that you should do, necessary steps that you should take regarding picking a mate. Listen to this episode. Tammy Janelle is a wonderful woman married to Rick Janelle, the preacher here at Bellevue Church of Christ. I am privileged to work alongside this good family. In this episode, we have a very candid conversation about dating and what we should look for as young adults when choosing a mate. Stay tuned. Hey, Miss Tammy, it's great to have you on the show today. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. It's good to be here, Daniel.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to our conversation for over a week now, and I know that this will add value to my life and also to the lives of those who are listening. And I'm just very curious to see and to know about some of your stories as we continue on throughout this episode, and just to hear about how you were able to choose your teammate and the practical advice that you can give to those who are listening. So I just want to give space right now just to allow you the time to introduce yourself so that those who are listening can get to know you better.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tammy Janelle. I am a retired school teacher. I've taught 25 years elementary and special education. I'm married to Rick Janelle, who's the minister at the Bellevue Church of Christ. We just celebrated our 43rd wedding anniversary. We have 4 children. They're all married, so they're not really children anymore. And 2 of them have children, our grandkids, and we have one of our daughters is expecting in May. So enjoyed that, and we're just proud of all of them. They've all gotten their college degrees. They've all gotten jobs and homes, and or they're launching their way. And the most important thing is we're very proud of is that they're all members, active members of their churches, and so that's the biggest blessing.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely great. I know that I was privileged to hear a wonderful story that Rick told us the other day while at a meeting, and he was just alluding to a guy uh, that he asked the question. He said, how do you deal with this? And I think the guy, one of his children had a disability, and he said, how do you deal with this? How do you go through every day, doing the tedious things that you have to do to make sure that your kid is taken care of? And the guy responded that, well, Rick, I think you have the harder job. You have to worry whether or not your kids are going to come back once you give them the keys to the car, and you have to wonder if they're going to remain faithful Christians and stuff like that. And I said, man, that is a very, very interesting perspective. So
Yeah.
that's a very wonderful thing that they're all faithful Christians, married. And I think you said you had to have a new grandbaby on the way. And
Yes.
so that's fantastic. Today, what we want to talk about, we want to help others who are listening to be successful in their marriages and their courtship, I guess I should say, and also in the process of dating. There are many young people who are looking for their quote soulmates unquote and the one. And so we want to make sure that we just sort of look at this in a very very logical way, very practical way. I know it'd be impossible to cover every detail, but just as much as we can do. And our topic is choosing a teammate. Now, as far as my personal study and really research into this particular topic, whenever you think about sports, my teammate for a sport or a teammate for a class project, the key things that I found that people listed were they want someone who is smart. Okay, so they want someone who can contribute mentally to the task at hand, whether that's basketball, football, or science project, whatever the case may be. They want someone who is trustworthy. And I think trustworthy to be that umbrella term that you can include is inclusive of someone who is committed, someone who's committed to the project or the team. Also someone who is faithful. You never have to worry about this person missing the assigned date, missing a practice, or anything like that. And then
Right.
also, they wanted someone who is easy to work with or easy to get along with. And so, just a quick story about my experience in basketball. My coach had a phrase, and that phrase was KYP. And he would yell that phrase from the bench and say, "Hey, KYP, KYP." And it means to know your personnel. And
Yeah.
one assignment or really cool experience that we had for summer camp is we had 5 minute sessions to learn our teammates. And then we spend the rest of the day just getting to hang out with that one teammate to learn everything about them. And so I just think it's pretty cool to have a teammate, but not only to have a teammate, but to have someone that you're not afraid to go to war with. And that's what we want to ensure and help these young people find as it relates to dating and ultimately to the goal of marriage. And so, just in your perspective, how would you recommend unmarried emerging adults to spend time together if they were dating instead of just being friends?
That's I think the hardest part is I think picking activities that you both enjoy, uh, trying to be in more public spaces. And of course, like this COVID has thrown everything out,
Yeah,
out the window as far as what you could go do or not do. That's made it tough. Trying to find things that don't cost money, do not cost money.
yeah,
I mean, a walk in the park a free concert or something like that. But I think it's fine. And then and time where you can talk to each other and find out about each other. And that's I think the most important thing is you've got to me, you have to marry your best friend.
right.
And if that person can't be your best friend, and like you said, those qualities of trustworthiness and responsibility and morality, then that's it's not going to work.
Right. You brought up an interesting point. Do things where you can get to know the other individual.
Right.
I look at things like watching a movie, and I'm not saying that watching a movie is a bad idea for a date, but it really doesn't lend any space or time for you to get to know that person because when you're watching a movie, I mean, the idea is to be silent, right? Be
Right.
silent
Right.
and your attention is focused on that movie. And just the idea of walking in the park, I guess just kind of off the top of my head, I wonder why it is so difficult for my generation especially to go on those dates that will require you to get outside of your quote comfort zone unquote and know this person. I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think it's a lack of social skills or what?
I think there's a lot of lack of social skills because I see kids that, all they can do is text. I mean, I've even seen
Mm,
people sitting at a table texting each other. It looks like they're supposed to be on a date and they're texting. It's like, what's
wow.
going on here? you know, it's putting together complete sentences, and yeah, I think there's a lack of social skills, and it's going to take, maybe it means finding a book that you just go through together, that's
Mm,
talking about questions or something, or making a list of questions like what's the most important things you'd like to know about me, so, anything like that that just helps you talk about your story. How did you grow up? Because my aunt has a little picture of a man and he's got this big pack on his back,
mhm,
this big bundle. And when you get up close to it, it's a village.
mm,
And it's the idea that everywhere you go, you take that village with you.
mm,
And it recreates your background, and the way you view things. I mean, I grew up in very small towns and ranching and farming communities in Colorado and in Texas, and where everybody knew everybody, and you really knew your teammates when you played sports, and it's even such small communities that the boys would play the girls, or the boys and girls would play basketball together, and nobody even thought about it,
right.
and so I think that, but that gives me a different perspective because I didn't grow up in the big city.
Right.
How I look at things, looks different, and what I value sometimes. But and you didn't have everything to entertain you with. We didn't have video games when I was a
Mhm.
kid. you did board games, or you talked, or you played ball, or things like that with bicycle riding. So I think
Right.
that is something that's a struggle today, because people either get in their game systems, or they get, which you can get to know people in a game, especially if you're doing something that you have to work together.
Right.
But a movie, like I said, unless you talk about the movie afterwards, like I said, it's not really a get to know you kind of thing.
Right. And I think one area that you and I relate to is being from those small areas, growing up in a small area. I grew up in a very small area where there was about, I think, 1360 was the population there in my hometown. And we had it was never an awkward moment to talk to our teammates. I mean, we
Right.
lived
Yeah.
right
Because you knew
down the road.
everybody. You
Right.
saw them all
Yeah.
day long.
We
Yeah.
live right down the road from each other. So it's like, well, hey, what's up, Tony? You know, and
Yeah.
when the coach assigns us to go and hang out an entire day, well, it was just another day in our lives. You know,
Right.
this is what we do normally anyway. So
Yeah.
it's just unfortunate to see this sort of digression as it relates to dating and courting and just being social altogether. I think about this particular question, like why is it so important, especially from a woman's perspective? Why is it so important for a young woman to be concerned about the young man she chooses to date?
Well, I think it's you're investing, you're going to invest your whole life with that person.
Mm,
So you better kind of have some ideas up front as to what you want.
right.
And it's just like, if you could pick like the sports teams, what are those teams where you could pick your own team and everything?
Mhm.
You look at all the statistics and what do you want for the quarterback, and all the fantasy teams, you look at
Right.
what all you want, and you've got an idea of what you want. And I think girls need, and guys too, they need to look at what do they want out of a spouse,
Mhm.
and because let's face it, who you date, who's you going to marry.
Right.
If you don't date them, you're not going to marry them. What I mean? They're just not going to show up. So if you don't limit that, look at that and see what do you want? I mean, like, I wanted a Christian,
Right.
a faithful Christian, not just somebody that said they came to church, but somebody that it was really important to. I wanted someone that was honest and hardworking, that was dependable. I also looked at, did that person make a good father? Is this somebody that wants to be a father? And do they want, how do they act with kids? Are kids a bother to them, or do they really enjoy interacting with little kids?
Right.
Those are some things that I looked at. And I wanted somebody that was, I could talk with and, like, say, be good friends with. And those are things that I looked at. And so when I saw somebody that was, Mr. Party, that wasn't the person I wanted, or somebody that, maybe they were a really nice guy, but they're just not responsible. They couldn't keep a job. They kept
Right.
from job to job to job, like, well, this isn't going to be stable. So those are some things, I think you need to up front, and maybe you need to talk to some other people, especially if you don't have a father yourself. I mean, I know some girls, or so many girls, are growing up today without a father figure, and they need to find that in maybe uncles or grandfathers or other people in the community.
Right. You brought up another interesting point, and being able to set those qualities and be able to identify those qualities for yourself in order to go and look for those same qualities in someone else, especially from a woman's perspective, and as it relates to a husband. I remember being a teammate both in basketball and in football, and the hardest thing for me was to figure out, okay, how do I tell this guy, especially when you had an altercation, right? How can I tell this guy, that these are just some of the things that I'm not going to do? I became a Christian in my junior year in high school. And after games, people want to go party, they want to drink, and they want to smoke and stuff like that. And that was just not my lane. And it
Yeah.
almost felt that I was the party pooper, right? Type of person. Like, I
Uh-huh.
want to have fun. And I never knew how to set those boundaries for my teammate in order for them to know, like, hey, listen, I respect you as a human being, but I don't get down like that. I don't do those type of things.
Yeah.
So I guess as it pertains to a relationship, how can a young woman set boundaries without, going to the extreme of pushing the guy away, or going to that extreme of allowing that guy to get too far, if you understand what I'm saying?
Right. There's Rick and I were talking about this, and he has a book that he'd given our daughter, and I don't know if the name of the book was The Secret or The Secret Keeper, but this lady had this idea is that as a woman, a young woman, you have this beautiful secret, your body, your virginity, everything. It's a beautiful secret, and it's only meant for one person to open and see and know about, and it's so therefore it should determine your judgment as to what you wear. You're not going to wear things that are very revealing, because this secret is for someone special. You know what I mean? And it's just kind of a positive way to look at that. And then when you think about that, then you start setting boundaries. Okay, how far, I've got to keep my secret, and I want that to be something special. And if I don't do that, then I'm not a very good secret keeper. My integrity is not what it ought to be. And I think that helps a young lady say, okay, this is where it stopped. This is it. And up front, tell the guy, this is it, and why? It's because I want this for my husband. And if you can't respect that, then I don't need to be dating you.
Right.
And it really comes down to that, because if he doesn't have the self-control, or if he doesn't have that respect for you, then this relationship can't go on.
Right.
And on the negative side, I told my daughters that whoever you marry, you're going to have to tell them everything you did with past boyfriends. And you better think about that. Because whoever you're marrying, you're going to have to tell them. And that's kind of the negative side of the secret keeper, And so think about where you want that boundary to be,
Right. That was, man, I never looked at it that way. Just being mindful of your actions prior to your husband. And once you get in that relationship, you have to bring up those past actions, and in order to have that transparent,
right,
trustworthy relationship. Now, my wife and I have shared, obviously, our secrets with each other, and boy, I had some dark secrets to share with her.
Right.
I'm thankful that she even continued to agree to walk down the aisle.
Right.
when that day came. So that's great advice. I wish I had learned that prior to even being married. So
yeah, and I think it goes for boys too. But but it
Absolutely.
is something you gotta, you need to think about.
Absolutely. Whenever I think about like having, especially from a female's perspective, I'll just speak to it from the guy's perspective. I know that in high school, college, whenever a guy is sort of seeking to date a girl, especially a Christian guy, which I was at the time, I'm looking for this girl with the qualities of a Christian, with self-respect, dignity. And you alluded to a young girl also revealing that or professing that in the way she dresses.
Yes.
There's a movement that happens every year in California, and it's called the slut walk, right? And
Oh boy.
this is a movement where literally the idea of dressing sort of skimpy, short skirts, even to the point where you're revealing actual body parts, you're leaving nothing to the imagination anymore. This movement sort of is looked at as to empower women to wear whatever they want, and it is to be okay. And that's the sort of society and mindset of the society that my generation is navigating within. And so just, I mean, quickly, like just a piece of practical advice that you would have. How do you combat that? Like, how do you combat something like that, still be fashionable, right? And remain a lady, remain a modest woman in the process.
Well, I think one thing, this is something Rick did for one of our daughters. He took one of our daughters to the shopping mall and said, I want you to watch what the girls wear and walking around, and I want you to watch how the guys look and react. And we're not leaving till you get the message. And after a while, she's like, Dad, but she got the message, because how did these girls that came across with the, the skinny, tops, or, and things are really, how do the guys behind them or across, even though they didn't know the guys were there sometimes, and sometimes they did, the looks they got, and the, look at that and everything. is that being respectful of you? You know, is that what you want from guys? Is that, you know, because to me, this isn't empowering. This is saying, hey, look at me. I'm a piece of meat to look at. You
Exactly.
know, I'm not a piece of beauty. I'm a piece of meat, you know.
Right.
And that's to me what it comes out to. It's not empowering. It's actually degrading.
Right. It's almost, and I know as a guy, I've been guilty of just looking at a woman not for her worth, but for what her body is offering at the moment, right? And it's ultimately because of what she's wearing. No matter if I try to look at her in a positive light, it's sort of difficult to have or to reframe or reshape your mind at that time when this girl walks up in front of you with a 2-inch long skirt on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're right, and you're trying to keep things.
You're trying to keep eye contact with
Right.
her.
And it becomes a little bit difficult. And I know psychologists have sort of done research, and a lot of that research points to guys sort of thinking with what they see first. They react to what they see versus what their mind is trying to process that you have as a woman on the inside.
Right.
Regardless of how true that is, I guess it has some merit to it when you look at pornography rates. Guys, mostly
Yeah.
guys watch pornography more than now. Girls are guilty of doing so, but mostly guys watch that sort of thing. And I just think it gives a lot of merit to what you're stating as it relates to what females should wear and how that professes them to still be modest and set those boundaries for their future husband. Another thing that I thought about was this: like, there's this overwhelming question that sort of gets asked, I guess, every time when, especially in my generation, when a girl is talking to a guy or vice versa, they want to know, is this the one, right? And I don't think that's to say that I'm not compatible with anyone else, but it's almost like, is this my soulmate? Like, this
Yeah.
person was sent from heaven for me, I mean, how do you know from the female's perspective, how do you know if a guy is the one?
Well, I think first of all, you need to spend some time. I mean, it's not going to be, some people think, oh, that first, you fall in love that
Yep.
first moment. No. I mean, you might really like them or something, but I mean, you need to find something out about them. I
Right.
mean, there may be some really bad skeletons there,
Right.
or some really bad, they can have some really bad addictions or something. You wouldn't know about it. So I think, first of all, you've got to spend time with them. And then you've got to see, is this person, I think the key to a lasting relationship is being friends, being close friends. And the other thing is having what the Bible calls agape love. And that means you want the best for that person, even if it costs you. You
Right.
want the best, and you want to do what's best for them. And even if it means making them angry, but that's what's best for them,
Right.
And I know, like, one of the ways I knew Rick was the person for me is because he would stand up to me. And I'm not like, wait a minute, the girl's saying something about stand up to me. But I'm a very strong-willed person, and I knew that I dated a couple of guys that I call puppy dogs.
Yeah.
Everything is like, what do you want? What's this? How, and everything. And I just felt like,
Yeah.
go away, please. I can't take it. I can't take, there's only so much like fussing over me I can take, like,
Right.
please. So, and so when I say he stands up to me, I don't mean that he's being mean or anything like that. I'm not afraid of him at all, but I just
Right.
mean he'll say, like, okay, no, you really shouldn't do this. And it's because it would make me look bad, or because it would be bad for me. It has nothing to do with him,
Right.
And so when you see that that person really wants what's best for you, in fact, an example is I dated a guy before Rick that was a very jealous type. And like one time I wanted to go to a concert with some friends and he couldn't go. So he didn't want me to go because he thought that would look bad that, he didn't take me.
Mhm.
And I'm going like, really? And that jealousy just, like, and Rick and I had been friends before. And so like one time at church, Rick sees me with this guy and he goes, Tammy, of course, it means I got to give him a hug. Right. And I'm like,
Right.
oh man, this guy's going to be so mad. But that was those, you had a question about red flag. That was one of my red flags. Like, this guy is so jealous, and I am so used to like hanging out with guys and talking to them, and because I was a tomboy and I love sports, and so I sometimes would rather talk to the guys about football than girls about fingernail polish.
I understand.
The fact that Rick would, like, as I say, stand up to me, but not in a mean way or anything. It was always in a way that this is what's best for you, or this is what's best for us. Maybe there's something I really wanted or something. It's like, well, is this best for us, in the long run?
And I think
so. That
that's
was very important.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I even want to go a step further with that and just acknowledge in our society now, they have this idea that tolerance is acceptance, and acceptance means that you love someone. Um, Not necessarily. I don't have to
No.
accept everything in order to show that I love you. And the fact that you mentioned how Rick revealed his love for you and that he was willing to tell you some things, even though it may have upset you at the moment, but it was best for you. That's true love. True love
Right.
to me has those little moments of difficulty, or even those moments of disagreement where you work through them, and ultimately it arose because you love this person, right? Same thing as it relates to sports. You have moments in the game where there's going to be frustration. You're going to face some adversity, and that's not the time to forget that you're teammates.
Right.
I've seen some games that ended in a disaster because the team breaks down.
Right.
It's not that they were too far behind their opponents and to overcome them and to take back the lead and ultimately win the game, but it's because of that pressure.
Yeah.
The team broke down and they crumbled and they failed to remain disciplined.
Right.
And
I've especially seen like one person all of a sudden decides to think that they've got to make all the baskets or something like that. And you're like, wait a minute, this isn't working.
Exactly. And it just shows like, okay, well, what happened to that chemistry? Do we only have chemistry and love for one another when everything is going well? Or do we have that chemistry and love for each other, whether things are going well or bad? I mean, I think that obviously it's supposed to be in both of those times, whether there's good times or bad times, you still need to have that love and that chemistry with one another. You talked about red flags, and this was one of the things that I think it bothered me the most, especially going throughout college. Some people, and I've met some people that think they have gone too far, right? Or maybe they have invested too much in the relationship. And so I met a person who was engaged, right? And he was engaged with a young woman. And we went to church together while I went to college or attended school in Mobile. And he was engaged with a young woman who had ultimately chosen to live the party lifestyle. She wasn't a Christian, and he really loved her, right? I mean, he had already proposed, so in his mind, he's in too deep. On the flip side, I'm pretty sure there have been females within the same position. Some girls fall in love with guys who aren't Christians, even though they are, and so they don't have the same team, so to speak. And so, I mean, let's talk about that first. How do you, as a young female, what's your practical advice for them if the guy's not a Christian and they've already proposed to them and they're in too deep, but they see these red flags? What do you?
It's time to get out. Run.
Absolutely.
Run. I mean, I think you have to look at those flags and deal with them. I've known a lot of people that'll say, "Oh, it'll get better after you get married. Oh, it'll straighten itself out." No, once you get married, it's like you put gas on the fire. It's going to be 10 times worse. So if he's jealous now, you get married, it's going to, he's got a temper, whatever it is. If he's into alcohol and drugs, marriage is not going to fix it. So I think the biggest thing is like, okay, this is my whole life ahead of me. And I don't care how much time I've invested. That's still not my whole life. And, it's okay. It's time to, if these things, whatever the problem is that you see, if they can't be dealt with and fixed, then you got to get out of it.
Right. I know as Christians, you just alluded to something that was perfect. In my mind, I know that I've met families who are Christians that has, sort of utilized marriage as this way to get their daughter or son out of trouble in this sense. They fornicated before marriage. There's a baby on the way. We don't want the rest of the congregation to know, or any of our Christian friends or relatives to know. So, hey, listen, you guys need to go ahead and get married, and that's going to solve all your problems. But then on the flip side, I've known some Christians who they just don't want their children to get married, even though they've made it to the point of to the age of accountability, so to speak. They're making their own living. They're out of the house, and they just keep saying, oh, just stay friends. It'll come one day. They just totally discourage marriage, and so there are two extremes of it, right? And so I
Right.
guess in my mind, the question is, how do you? Are there any advantages, rather? Are there any advantages to dating or remaining friends, and just dating, playing around, experimenting, if you will, or is there more of an advantage to just be married?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I mean, it's kind of individual, but I think in that case, like if there's a baby on the way, if they're not ready to get married, then they shouldn't get married.
Right.
It shouldn't be forced on them. Uh, and they may go their separate ways or they may come together. I mean, a lot of it's going to depend on the families and how they handle everything. But that's a tough question. But I think they've got to be forced either direction is not good.
Absolutely. It is. It is. It's actually when preparing for this episode, I know my wife and I and one of my good preaching friends were sort of brainstorming what some of the prevalent issues of marriage being discouraged and why. Some of those reasons were, it's not, you can do everything that you want in a marriage outside of a marriage, right? You don't really have to, lock the wheel or, lock yourself up for life and now you can't go have fun. Right. And it's sort of like people view marriage as this end of life type thing. Like you don't have a life anymore. And I don't know. That's been one of the questions that have baffled my mind about my generation in particular. It's like, how do I get my generation involved and encouraged when it comes to marriage? And I know now we've begun a new book and on Wednesdays, Engage, rethinking how we walk down the aisle, and that's to motivate my generation to think about marriage. Don't just get into a relationship and not have a goal for that relationship. And so I think it is difficult on both ends, especially if you're doing it just for a cover up. It's probably not going to last. And if you're being discouraged from marriage like your entire life by your family and friends, then it's probably going to be difficult for you to ever give into the idea of being married. But one other thing I thought about too was, as godly people, you and I both share in the faith of Christianity. A beautiful thing. We have a beautiful Savior in Jesus, and a wonderful God, a deliverer, a protector. And one of the things I know young ladies and men look for is a protector when it comes to a spouse or someone they're dating. You alluded to earlier that you had a quality when looking for your mate, which is our good brother Rick. You wanted him to be a Christian. How does a godly relationship look like? How can someone identify a godly relationship?
Well, I think it's a lot of it is like, what is your commitment? I mean, do you actually go to church? Do you actually pray? Do you actually read your Bible? Is being a Christian important, or is this just something you're got to label? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That is what some of the things you look at. What at that time Rick would give devotion. How I met Rick is he was a high school student. He came to our college church group and
Mhm.
gave a devotional, and that was the
Okay.
first time I ever met him. And then later on, he started coming to our Bible class, our university student Bible class. So I mean, I met him as someone who's actually actively preparing lessons and doing things as a Christian. And then
Right.
it was also something that we talked about. We talked about Bible things and Bible subjects and marriage and how that fit into a Christian life. And, what is a Christian parent? So that would be what I would, that's what I would say.
Absolutely. There has been times where I guess preparing or looking for, prior to my being married, there have been times where I've looked for a young Christian woman and didn't know exactly where to look. Even in the church, I just didn't know where to look. I didn't know how to approach a Christian, and it was just, you just kind of go through that,
Yeah, awkward stage.
yeah, that awkward stage, and you're just trying to show interest. And it sort of goes back to the idea where we were talking about a young woman setting boundaries. Like, how do you do so without pushing a guy away and without allowing the guy to go so far? And so I guess my next question would be, are there any specific qualities young aspiring wives should obtain when preparing for marriage?
Okay. I thought of something last night. It came to me, and the first thing is respect for men. We're living in a society that does not respect men. You look at our TV shows, and the dad is kind of this dumb, ignorant person or whatever. There's so many. I know as a teacher, over half of my kids didn't have their original parents. They either didn't have a dad or it wasn't their real dad.
Right.
And I know that so many girls are being raised by divorced mothers or being abandoned by their fathers. And so what kind of view do they have of men? And do they have a man that they can respect, in their life, And so one of the, in the Bible, it talks about, husbands, love your wives, and wives, respect your husbands. And there's a reason there's different words there. Women need love more than respect. Men need respect more than love. And if you can't respect men, then you have trouble respecting men. You always think of a man as trying to take advantage of you, or what can they get from you, or you can't trust them. If those are the recordings that are in your head, you've got to work on actually getting those out of your head and finding men you can trust. Whether it's a Christian family, you can say, look, I just need to hang out with a real family because I didn't have one,
Right.
or some Christian adopted grandparents. I just need to hang out with, what is it really like to have a Christian man and wife that really have a good marriage? What does it look like? So I think respect. And then the other thing is, Rick and I were talking that guys need girls. They want women who are honest and real and don't play games. And girls tend to want to play games, to get attention, or, to be the center of attention, or things like that. And guys don't play games very well when it comes to that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And I think, would you agree that that's a true statement, that
Absolutely.
you feel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then, of course, like taking care of yourself and pride. And I think they need to know how to cook and clean, but I don't think just girls need to know how to cook and clean. I think guys need to know how to cook and clean, because it's just a life skill.
Right.
And you made me think of something when you said something about people not wanting to get married, and why should you get married? And I just thought of this illustration. I played basketball and volleyball and ran track. Well, you had practice games, and they were good for you. You learned and everything else, but practice games was not the same as a real game. It's not the same. And I know people who've lived together, and sometimes they've lived together for years, and they're finally like, awesome, let's get married. And then they're divorced within 6 months because they were in this practice game, and they were never really on the line. They weren't ever completely committed, and when you're really in that game and you've got to work with your, this is for whatever it is, whatever stakes it is, it's a different ball game. And so this living together is not the same as a marriage.
That is great.
It's just not the same. It doesn't have the commitment. It doesn't have the what do you say? It doesn't have, you don't have everything into it like you have. And it's too easy to walk out.
Exactly.
I think that's the biggest thing. Like Rick and I, we've said, divorce, I may kill you, but we won't have a divorce. Murder, yes. Divorce, no.
That's a good principle to live by.
And if you really, if in the back of your mind is always, well, I can get out of this,
Right.
then you're not going to put your whole self in.
Mm, that's true. I think it reminds me, as you alluded to, going back to sports, right? If you don't, you can tell if a teammate is half in or all the way in.
Right, right.
We had above our locker room all in, and when we ran out for football, we had to smack that phrase as we went out, and that was to remind everyone: listen, now when you get on the field, you're not going to have your mom, your dad, you're not going to have the coaches technically because they got to stay on the sideline. You're going to have your brother. Your brother is right beside you. He is the one you're going to battle with and for. And so
Right.
if you can't trust him, if you can't trust your teammate to do his assignment, then you can't expect to win this game. And you need
Right.
somebody
Right.
in to do that. And I know that it's those guys who weren't in, yeah, they got into some trouble, not only with the coaches, but after the coaches left, you had to
Yeah.
pick on them a little bit in the locker room. So
Right. Like, yeah. Like, hey,
right,
you were supposed to be blocking for me. Come
exactly.
on.
Right. Like I fumbled twice and I got yelled at, but it was actually your fault. You forgot
Yeah.
your blocking assignment.
Yeah.
I mean, all of those things are very prevalent and pertinent to our um, having successful marriages, even having successful courtship stages where we are preparing for marriage. You know, when you brought up something in scripture where wives are to love their or to respect their husbands and husbands love their wives. Are there any biblical characters, female characters that are ideal role models for young aspiring wives today?
Okay. Well, like Sarah, it talks about Sarah called her husband, Lord, and obeyed him, and did not. And that's not saying that we should go around saying, "Oh Lord," to our
Yeah,
husbands, but it's the idea is that she trusted him. She trusted him. She put herself in her hands. Uh, Mary, Jesus's mother, she was willing. God, use me. God, use me however you want to use me. Those are things that I think about. I think of a lot of bad examples, like was it Rachel and Leah, how they, like fought with each other and try to up each other and things like that, the jealousy. And that's never good.
right. Absolutely. I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier. You gave this illustration of you knew Rick was the one for you because he wasn't afraid to stand up to you. He wasn't afraid to show his love for you and to you, even if that meant having to tell you something that you didn't necessarily want to hear. As a wife, and thinking about that verse in Ephesians where wives are to respect their husbands. I mean, what practical advice could you give females regarding that aspect? Because some believe that in order for them to respect their husbands and maybe even not get the last word in a particular situation or that idea of submitting, they look at it as, I'm no one's slave, right? I'm
Right,
my
right.
own woman. I can make my own decisions. You illustrated that perfectly, and recognizing or acknowledging that, hey, listen, he told me something I didn't want to hear, but I still listened and understood that he loved me for it. I mean, what practical advice could you give to females who are struggling with that?
Well, first of all, submission is two ways.
Mhm.
He's to submit to you just as you're to submit to him, and people need to understand that we aren't each other's slaves, but we are each other's partners.
Right.
And also, I mean, he's willing to listen to me when I say, like, you're blowing this,
Mhm.
this is not good for you, whatever it is. And so I think it's that honesty, being that honest communication is a key thing, is that honest communication, and knowing that uh, he's got my back and I've got his back. And I'm not going to criticize him in public, and he's not going to criticize me in public, or put each other down. We've always got each other's back, and that's very important. And you know, that's not the only way that I knew he was the one for me. It was also, those feelings and feeling like, he's my best friend, and I didn't feel like I could live without him, so to speak.
Right.
There'd be a big hole there. But that was just one of those key things that made me realize, compared to a lot of other people I'd talked to or, dated, that either they didn't want to stand up to me at all, or they'd stand up to me, but it was very selfish and very like bullying, and
Right.
that's not right, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree and understand. Well, Miss Tammy, as we prepare to come to an end, I've thoroughly enjoyed your practical advice and knowledge regarding the different subtopics as it relate to our main topic. I think one last thing as before we end is when people get into a relationship, and I know I've struggled with this myself, so this is this sort of comes from a personal experience, but nevertheless, I know that there are a bunch of young adults today who struggle with this idea. When is there a right time, or is there a right time to say I love you?
Ooh, I'm not sure that there is an exact right time, but I do think it shouldn't be early on.
Mhm.
It needs to be after you really feel like you know that person, that you've spent some time and communicated and got to know them. And then also there should be some level of commitment there. This isn't just you're hanging out every couple of days or something like this. Is like you've really decided that you uh, want to spend time just maybe exclusively with each other. So that's the only kind of gauge I've got. Other than that, I can't
That's
I don't know if that helps or not.
that helps. I mean, I wish I knew then what I know now, especially how you just answered that. Is there's really early on. I mean, I would advise away from that too. I wouldn't say I love you so early into the relationship, but as you begin to build a rapport a little bit and begin to know that person, it's okay to say it, especially when you consider how our society looks at the word love. You define the word
Right,
love that we should have for every individual, whether or not we've ever met them, but especially
right,
when we come into contact with them, we should have agape love
right.
for every individual, simply because they were made in the image of God. And so but obviously, when you consider the way society looks at love, yeah, you might not want to say it so quickly. So
Quickly, right, right, right,
you may
right,
scare
right,
someone away, So
right, right. You don't want to scare away. You kind of want to see where they're feeling or where they're at. Yeah,
right, right.
yeah,
So all
on
of that
that.
just depends, and but hopefully, whenever that person or individual uses those words, or use that word, I should say, they're in it for the long haul. The other person, feels the same, and they can be on their way towards a successful courtship and even marriage. So
Yeah, hope
those are the
so.
goals. But as we prepare to close now, I just wanted to also make space, towards the end, for you to just give any closing remarks that you have. But I also wanted to know of do you have any? And I know I didn't prepare you for this question necessarily, but do you have any books that you would recommend for young people today to just go ahead and read if they're dating or thinking about dating, or maybe they're engaged already? Do you have any books that you would recommend?
I have one, but I can't remember the name of it, so I'll have to get back with you on it because it
Okay.
talks about marriage being a covenant
Okay.
and and it's all about dating and things like that. And it's really very, uh, it's very honest and open,
Mhm.
but I'll have to go find it.
No, no, no worries. Like I said, I know I didn't prepare you for that. It just made me think about it when you
Yeah,
alluded to some books that you had given your daughter earlier on.
yeah,
So, I know for my wife and I, we read His Needs, Her Needs, which was a great book. I forget.
yeah. That is a very good book because I
Yeah, I
think
forget
I
the
think
guy's name. Is it
we
Gary
sometimes
Chapman or
don't
something?
realize that we're different.
Hmm.
Men and women are different. I don't care what society says. We are wired different.
Yeah,
We are wired completely different, and
absolutely.
and and we need to realize that and accept that.
Right. So another good book too that Key and I read is what was the name of that book? Oh yeah, Five Love Languages. We
Oh,
read
yeah,
that
that's
book.
a
That
good
was
one too.
Yeah,
Yes,
that was really
yes.
great. So
Yeah,
um
because we tend to give person in our love how we
mhm,
want to be loved, and that's not necessarily what shows them love. You
exactly,
know.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I learned that one the hard way after because I'm a huge sports fan, so I'm thinking when I think of a date night, I'm thinking like, oh, we can grab some, especially early on, we can grab some popcorn, Sprite, and hey, let's sit in front of the TV and watch the Super Bowl or something. And
Yeah, and she's going like, no.
nah, yeah, she wasn't looking forward to that kind of date night. So, but after reading
Right,
that
right.
book, I began to
Realize, okay, this is not what she wants.
Right, this is my
And you
language versus
compromise.
hers. Right.
And you compromise. She'll come watch a game with you every now and then.
Yep. And she has, to her credit, she has. So
Yeah,
she's
right,
learned a thing or two along the way, So I appreciate that very much. But
right, right.
any closing remarks that you have or anything?
Well, like I said, I don't know if I've been helpful. I can't say that I'm an expert, but that's just kind of from my heart, what I've found out through the years or whatever, and hope it's been helpful for anybody that listens.
Well, absolutely. Well, I can say this: it's been helpful for me. I thoroughly enjoy doing podcasts where I get to talk to other individuals because you get to hear their perspective. You get to learn them more, and also you get to take this sort of theological, abstract sort of answers that people give you to concrete issues
Uh-huh.
and make it practical, which is one of my primary goals for this podcast. So
Right.
I say that you did an excellent job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
You answered every question, which is also a goal. And so I'm very thankful. Thank you so much for just sharing your practical knowledge and also accepting the invitation to be on the podcast. So
You're quite welcome. Thank you very much for considering me. I appreciate that.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of the Fourth Quarter Christianity Podcast. I am so thankful that you continue to support and pray for this effort. And I hope that it has been a blessing to you as it continued to be a blessing to me. This is an important issue, and I think that everyone in my generation needs to talk about dating and the entire process. Talk about marriage. Talk about choosing the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with. Is one that we need not to avoid, but talk about. And so I hope this episode helped you. If you would, please leave a review, leave a rating for the podcast. Share this episode with a friend. This will help with the exposure of the podcast and also would help those who do not have the proper guidance when it comes to this important issue. Thank you guys so much and take care. May God bless you.